So in this passage that Francesca just read, we're coming to the end of our Monday chapels that we've had all semester in the book of Philippians. You may know it was probably the church in which Paul himself had his most profound friendships. And yet, if you've noticed, if you remember Ray Chang's message last week, it was a flawed church that has some deep divisions. So it was much like we are, much like our churches are today. But even with their flaws, they'd done some good things. They had supported Paul when nobody else had supported him. And even when he was in prison, where he wrote this letter, even from the prison, they had renewed their support for him. So the last part, the verses that Francesca read, it's really his thank you letter. And yet it has to be one of the most affectionately awkward thank you letters ever written in history. Because if you notice that, you go back and read it, he wanted to say, hey, I'm really grateful for your gifts, but I didn't really need them, because God provides for all my needs. I trust him. So some of the most quoted verses in Scripture are there, but you probably haven't seen them in the context. I can do all things through the one who gives me strength. He's here with me, so I don't need your gift, but thank you anyway. Or I have learned to be content in every situation, whether I have a lot or have nothing. So even if I had nothing, I would have still been content, but I still want to say thank you. So it's that feeling. So the lesson that hits me and why I think it's so appropriate for our chapel today is this. God guides our lives. God provides. He's sufficient. And yet, I'll tell you, my experience is he so often does his guiding and providing through Christian friends. And really what I wanted to do today is I want my friend Jamie and me together to give a testimony to that. Students, I'll tell you what's been on my heart. I am praying that God will give you the kind of friendship he's given to me 50 years since we met here at Wheaton. So before we think about that, we're going to sing one of the songs he just arranged. You can jump in and sing when you get a chance. Sings about God and God alone being our rock of ages. So, Jamie, why don't I call you over and you can grab this microphone. I know this is one of the things you most want to do, is me interview you here. I've wondered where I should start. Maybe with your most embarrassing situation in your life, or maybe with your most persistent sins. What do you think? Wouldn't surprise you, would it? Why don't we start where Why don't we start where our friendship began that day? I think it was your mom and your aunt brought you to campus and on to 2 East in Fisher, and we got to meet you. Jamie, as we think about God's guidance, tell us about how you experienced God's guidance even to come here in the first place.
I would say that God's guidance in the first place was like a good shepherd with a really stupid sheep. I grew up in southwest Pennsylvania. Maybe some of you are from Pennsylvania. From a fairly rural high school. I had guidance counselors really didn't exist in our high school. And I didn't know how to apply for college. I applied to one college, Wheaton, because it was the only place I wanted to go. And they let me in. I had no safety school. I had no reach school. I just came here. And yet I see in it's kind of a convergence of hubris and naivete. I see God's hand guiding me here and putting me on 2 East and leading me to Greg. The very first day we met, he welcomed us. I felt welcome. By Greg, by the entire community. It was like coming home for me that first year.
So you came first as a conservatory student, and now, and you can hear.
Don't get too excited.
Yeah. because he abandoned you conserv students. I'll just let you know, and went into the whole language, the whole direction of language. I remember a dream that you had that you told me about, but talk about how God guided you in the way that he did.
To
go into
teaching?
language, yeah.
Yeah. So, I was just very briefly, I was in the conservatory. I loved it. I deeply respected the people who were teaching me there, but I decided there were more things I wanted to study. So I was a music major, and I practically finished the music major that first year. And then I was confronted by all of the, I don't know what you call them here, we call them distribution requirements, gen ed requirements, whatever, which included language, and I took German. I'd heard the German teacher was good. And she is now retired, but still lives in the area. I visited with her yesterday, and it was an extraordinary experience. I felt that I loved doing it, and I thought maybe I want to teach this later on. And so I was in Germany. Greg was in Germany with an evangelistic team, an indigenous German team, and he called me to come over after I was graduated from here. I played there, and I had already applied to schools before I had left. I'd left in the spring. I applied to schools. My mother had gathered all of the letters that came to our home address and sent them over to me in Germany. I got them all at once. I saw, here's my future. And I sat down to read them all, and one by one, they began with the sentence, "We had an extraordinarily strong pool of applicants this year," and I got rejected from every school. And I thought, what can I do? The following summer, I was at a Goethe Institute in Germany working some more on German. And one of my instructors, I think providentially, was from Princeton. I had applied to Princeton, actually, as a grad student. They rejected me. Twice. They rejected me twice. So I decided to go back and destroy the department from within. I reactivated my application based upon the recommendation letter that this former professor there had written, and I was rejected again. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is a dream that I had about a week before I got that second rejection letter. And I should preface this by saying that I grew up Presbyterian. My dad was a Presbyterian pastor. And we don't have visions. we don't have dreams. But I had a dream, and in the dream, I'll just relay this briefly, but it's important to get some of the details. My father, who had died when I was 14 and when I was in 9th grade, and left a tremendous emptiness in my life. I realized even later more than I realized at the time. My dad was standing in the dream holding an open book in front of himself like this. And I could see a picture, and the picture that I saw on that spread was of a hilly, snowy landscape, cold, not much light, sort of dusk was coming down. And on the snowy landscape were individual students studying at desks, dotted individually all over this landscape, each one alone by themselves. And in the middle of where the pages would have come together, there was a cluster of fir trees. And my gaze was directed in the dream. You know how dreams work. You don't know why this is happening, but they happen. My gaze was directed toward those trees because I then saw beams of light spreading out through the boughs, cutting through the boughs and onto that landscape. And as I kept looking, and I know this sounds cliche and corny, but it's what I saw in the dream. In the middle, the source of the light was a manger. And I realized this is Christ, incarnate in a dark world and spreading warmth and light. I woke up weeping. I've never had a dream like that since. Hadn't had one before, but I knew that this was God saying to me, this is what I do. I am incarnate in this world, and I want you to do that also in the context of academe. So that I applied a third year for grad school and got in. But
not into Princeton.
Not into Princeton, no. It was
some little school.
It was, okay, it was Harvard, okay. So, right. The Wheaton of secular schools. Yeah. So I was there and then was guided by God to a job at SUNY Binghamton, the State University of New York, and then to Princeton.
So Jamie, that's one of the challenging periods that you walk through and experience God's guidance, but you were present in my life in one of the most difficult times that Chris and I, my wife, had ever experienced with the death of our middle daughter. I've told the students about this in one of the chapels, for those of you who remember any of my chapels, about how that happened. And you were finishing your work at Harvard, I believe, and yet you were willing to leave and come across country to be with us, which is such an important part of friendship, just being with together. And then when I ended up doing that memorial service, which I think I just cried all the way through it, you sang a song there that I would like you to do, if I can make it through. Chris already said, how on earth can you sit up there with him doing that song? That lifted me up out of the pit that day. And I'm wondering if you would do that song for our students today.
Let me just explain briefly about the song. I heard this when I was in high school. A friend of mine sang it, and it was a friend of hers who had written it. I don't know who wrote it. I'm sorry, I wish I did. But that friend, a believer, had a friend, also a believer, who was killed tragically in a car accident. And this friend wrote this song to comfort the parents about what their son was now experiencing. It's called "Lay Me Down in the Arms of My Jesus."
Of my Jesus, hold me in the love that was promised from eternity. Lead me to the mansion that you have prepared just for me. I wish that I could show you all the things I'm beholding, the glory of the Lord now before me is unfolding. Jesus Christ himself is here, smiling to welcome me home. A new life has begun, given freely by Christ the Son, for you and me. There's a time when we will meet again. Tears will cease and love will reign in you. All of this and more has been promised just for you. Lay me down in the arms of my Jesus. Hold me in the love that was promised from eternity. Lead me to the mansion that you have prepared just for me. Lay me down in the arms of my Jesus.
There's no way to summarize 50 years of friendship, but Jamie, I remember so many great times together. I remember us talking about everything under the sun, including things like grammar and syntax, believe it or not. I remember...
I like grammar.
I know you do. You like it a lot. So I remember times of us, you coming and saying, there's a movie I watch, you want to see it? Yes, I want to see it. And us watching the movie, except I fell asleep and you didn't. So I never, but you had to, watching it there alone.
You remember the announcement when I was in my room in 2 East, right? I was doing music theory, minding my own business, and Greg lived right across the hall and opened the door and just popped in his head and said, I figured out what's wrong with you. You're totally depraved. And then he just shut the door and walked away.
And I think we've both proven that to be true, I think, over the years. So we have traveled together all over the world. Many of those things you made possible for us. I mean, we've cruised. Jamie, though he's single and I've been married, and he has become a part of our lives and a part of our family. Chris and Jamie and I vacation together. We have been in France together. We've been in Ireland together. We have cruised together. I think about us serving God together all over the world, in strange places sometimes. Once, if I remember right, we were the warm-up act for a clown. Both of us had our doctorates, and we looked at one another and said, so this is our future, right? So we did that. But I also remember that when I pastored in the churches, I would bring you in, and I would just put in the bulletin a solo by Jamie Rankin, and I would just put the text there, and you would create a song. Yeah, thank you. Many of the really good songs that we've done have grown out of those times. I think after all of this, one of the things that I have, as I've said, I wanted to bring you in because how much I long for people to know that though C.S. Lewis said that friendship is not essential to life, like art, like philosophy, which was my major, but boy, it enriches life. It enriches life. Do you have anything to say to our students about the value of a friendship or demands of a friendship?
I work alongside, unofficially, the Princeton Christian Fellowship, which is a wonderful group of faithful believers who gather together to worship God, form a community, and it's been happening for about 90 years now. This began in the 1930s. It's just an independent group, and I tell all the students with whom I get a chance, I tell them, and I emphasize it over and over, that they should identify while they're in college and university 1, 2, 3 people alongside whom they will walk for the rest of their lives, and that they will commit to doing that and be faithful to doing that, because it is a wellspring of joy and a wellspring of encouragement. It means delight, and it means sadness. As you heard, it means funerals as well as weddings. It costs you. Right now, you probably know this, but I didn't know this when I was sitting where you were sitting. It's easy to be friendly at a place like this because you're so close together. You can have a meal instantly. You can just, you walk 30 feet and you're near lots of people. when you're in grad school, and I noticed this right away, I was on one side of Boston, somebody else was on the other side of Boston. To have one meal together required the entire evening. And I didn't know that if I had enough time to do that. So it was hard. It was much harder to do that. It costs time, it costs money, and it costs emotion. The kinds of emotions that we've seen here. And yet, it is worth it. It sharpens you. It sharpens me. I don't know how right C.S. Lewis was about this. I think it's essential. Certainly the community of believers is essential.
So, amen. And I really long for you to take those words very seriously from chapel today. Now we're coming to the part of the chapel, because it's drawing near to the end, that I am terrorized by. Though I did a lot of music together with Jamie, hundreds and hundreds of concerts, I don't sing in these 2 years, I haven't sung at all. And yet I'm going to try. We'll see. We'll see what comes out. Please hold that until you'll say, how on earth did he end up? Anybody want to hear him sing? But the song I want to do, we have done hundreds, could we have done it 1,000 times? It's a song that I have sung to myself when I go into big exams, when I go into the hard places where I don't know what to do. And it was created in Jamie's sophomore year here. Jamie, I want you to tell us a little bit about the story, and then we'll see if I can do it, or we can do it.
The song actually came out, it was my junior year, actually, came out of a Bible study. And I'll explain in just a second. I'll try to relate this succinctly. But knowing how I came to be part of that Bible study is really part of the whole story. My first year here was a delight. I thrived. I loved being here. I loved the intellectual challenge. I loved the community of people. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And I really flourished in this environment. But rather than letting that flourishing lead me to praise my Creator and draw me closer to God, during my sophomore year, I let it become an obsession to be as successful as possible in my studies. And over the course of that year, I was not involved in any Bible studies or prayer groups or anything. I was here to study, I said, and I just continued studying. And over the course of that year, in studying, there was a jadedness and an emptiness, a dryness that set in, that finally, in the spring of that year, manifested itself in actions that were, frankly, just grievous to the heart of God. I crossed lines that I never imagined I could have crossed, and with that came waves of guilt and remorse and resolve not to let this happen again, and it did, and more waves. And so I felt that spring just out of control. I was in Traber at that point. I'd wake up every morning with a knot in my stomach and a kind of cloud over me, and mostly just fearful that I was a failure. My whole sense of who I was, which was brittle and fragile, had been shattered, I'd say now by God's grace. Because I thought of myself as a pretty good person. I slipped up now and then and needed forgiveness, but basically I was good. But Greg, in fact, had been right. I am totally depraved. In other words, that corruption has reached into my creativity, into who I am, and it manifested itself then. And I was Paul writes to the Romans, when you were slaves of sin, you were free with regard to righteousness, but what fruit were you getting at that time from the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death. And that's how I felt. But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. And so that next year, by God's grace, by friends in the community here, by instructors who counseled me, my feet were set on solid ground. I joined a Bible study. And at the end of that Bible study, it was in Isaiah, portions of Isaiah, the leader said, for our last meeting, I want you to bring something creative. Write a poem, paint a picture, do a song. We were all guys, and we thought, what are you talking about? And yet I thought, okay, I should try to do this. So I took some of the verses that had been most meaningful to me in Isaiah, from Isaiah 40 and 41, and wrote this song.
We'll see if I can sing this song. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. And I will help you, I will strengthen you, I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Fear not, for I am your God. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the Creator of the ends of the earth. So fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. And I will help you, I will strengthen you, I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Fear not, for I am your God. The Lord is the everlasting God, the Creator of all the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. He gives power to the faint, and to him that has no power he increases our strength. So fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. And I will help you, I will strengthen you, I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Fear not, for I am your God. Even youth shall faint and grow weary, young men shall fall exhausted, but those that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength, shall mount up with wings like eagles, and they shall run and not grow weary. You will walk and not faint. So fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. And I will help you, I will strengthen you, I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Fear not, for I am your God. And I will help you, I will strengthen you, I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Fear not. For